Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we're on episode 260. And tonight I thought we'd chat a little bit about Paracord, or more specifically, some of the shortcomings of Paracord. I know that Paracord, at least when I started getting into Bushcraft, or really researching it in the last, I shouldn't say the last few years, I guess it's been several years ago now, Paracord seems to be everywhere. Everybody talks about it, says it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, or people hate it, but there's always a lot of talk about Paracord when we talk about bushcrafting. It almost is up there with, like, bushcraft knives, you know what I mean? It's bushcraft knives, axes, saws, Paracord. Kind of seems like that's how things go when the most talked about. And we've never really...
And generally, everyone wants to wrap those items in Paracord.
Yeah, this is what I mean. Like, it always seems to turn up on, in any bushcrafting conversation, honestly. So I thought we'd actually have a little chat about it tonight, because we've touched on it in the past, and we have given a little bit here and a little bit there, but we've never actually settled down and had a good conversation on it. So for me, not that I'm anti-Paracord, don't get me wrong, I got lots of Paracord here, but I thought we'd talk a little bit about some of the shortcomings of Paracord that a lot of people overlook when they're first getting into it, because there's a lot of pros to Paracord too, don't get me wrong, but you gotta weigh out, is the pros worth the cons, or is the cons overcoming the pros? Like, it has a place. I absolutely acknowledge that. It may not be where you're using it currently, or maybe it's where you're not even thinking that it should be used. But once again, that's all kind of stuff we're going to talk about here tonight. So what about you, Ben? What is your basic line opinion on Paracord? I hope you're similar to my thinking on this anyway. If not, it'll make an interesting conversation.
Honestly, my last few years of me using Paracord have been a bit of a disappointment to me. I know some of your thoughts, so I won't try to run over yours, but I think the last time I used Paracord for anything, I was trying to get a tree that was caught up. It was caught up in a windstorm, and I needed to pull it down, so I managed to get tied to one end, and I was trying to use the Paracord as like a force enhancer where I loop it through itself and use. Anyways, the fucking stuff. I mean, sorry. It managed to cut itself up. It stretched a mile. Like, I walked like twice as long as I think I should have been able to before the stretch stopped. It broke. I mean, this stuff is supposed to be rated for what, $550? And you know, my measly 300 pounds at the time managed to shatter it with no effort. So I have, limited love for it. That being said, it's generally readily available, and it does have the multi-strands, which have some advantages, and we will talk about that, I think.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And that's the thing. I'm much along with your line of thinking. When I got introduced to Paracord, and I'm not going to lie, when I was first into bushcraft, and I knew Paracord existed, it just wasn't readily available where I was. This was before online shopping and the world getting small, and you can order stuff and have it to your door in 2 days. Long before any of this, we basically had the corner store, and whatever rope the corner store sold is the rope you used. If you didn't use the corner store's rope, you just didn't use rope. You made cordage or something, you know what I mean? So, but when I first got into the whole, oh wow, I can order anything I want and have it here relatively quick, which, maybe 10 years ago, I jumped on the Paracord train. I was like, I always heard about this stuff. I'm going to buy a ton of it. It's so utilitarian. The stuff's amazing. So I still have tons of the stuff around the house because I bought so much of it to start with before learning its shortcomings that I basically have a lifetime supply of the crap floating around here. And I have all different kinds of it too. I have basic Paracord. I got Paracord with reflectors in it. I got some of that fancy gimmicky stuff that has stuff in the inside strands. Like this stuff here is the fire starting stuff.
I got some of that.
I got the stuff over there that I actually should dig it out. It has the little wire in it and the fishing line and all that crap. Like, I bought everything because I thought this stuff was going to be literally God's gift to bushcrafting. So to, coin a term. And honestly, it was great stuff. I'm not saying it wasn't great. It's just there was some shortcomings that I was like, if I had known this beforehand, I probably wouldn't have bought $400 worth of the stuff. You know what I mean? So let's jump right into it, going into the deep end. And I might as well say, at the start of this episode, folks, we're going to beat up Paracord. Or at least that's my plan. as I'm basically going to give you all the negative stuff on Paracord. And then I'm going to try and revive it a little bit towards the end. But I assume that's for you folks that, stick around that long. Just shout out to Danny joining us here, Red Sand Adventures. Once again, folks, if you've never checked out his channel, it's definitely worth checking out there on YouTube. He's doing some great stuff with a little truck and a cap. It's definitely worth a watch. But anyway, jumping back on, you mentioned a couple things there, Ben, and that's right where I wanted to start. The number one thing that I didn't like about Paracord was the stretch factor. Because I bought Paracord thinking I could use it as ridge lines for hammocks. And I'm going to turn this over to you because I see the twinkle in your eye already. So why don't you tell us the shortcomings with using Paracord as ridge line?
Yeah, so Paracord just always seems to be able to get longer. And there's no limit to its stretch. There is, but it doesn't appear that way. So if you decide to put your tarp out and you tie it up with Paracord, and you get it nice and taut and everything is looking pretty awesome, and you come back 15-20 minutes later, everything is sunken, everything is loose and flappy, and it's not pleasant. It's like me after I lose 100 pounds. It's it's not what you want. Like, you want your tarp system, you want your ridge line to be fairly stable, and Paracord is not, because of its natural weave and its inner cores, and the fact that it's the material it's made of. It actually does continue to stretch, and if moisture gets involved, it seems to get a little bit extra too. So it always seems to have a bit more stretch into it. So you can't get a nice solid length of it. So more traditional ropes have much less stretch, and maybe a little bit more tension can be put on them. And as such, you can get a better lay on your hammock, tarps and ridge lines. Do not try to support a whole hammock with Paracord. It's a losing battle, in my opinion. You'll never get a great lay. You'll probably end up in the ground by the time you wake up in the morning, if not catastrophically, at least from the stretch. If you're gonna do it, there is a way, and it involves multiple loops and a lot of trust.
No, and absolutely. This is what I found with Paracord, was it just stretched. It never stopped stretching, like you said. And it's by design that it kind of stretches like that, because you got that outer sheath as well as those inner strands, which a lot of people argue is one of the big benefits to Paracord. You're getting multiple pieces of rope. I'm not going to argue that. You know what? Has a place. But because it has that outer sheath and it stretches over the inside cords, the dang stuff always stretches, and it never holds the weight it says it's going to hold. The most common Paracord that we have out there is probably 550. It seems to be the one that pops up everywhere. You know what I mean? It's rated for 550 pounds, has 7 strands inside. I have never seen this hold 550 pounds. Never.
What was Paracord designed for, though?
I'm assuming parachutes.
So, if you're going to jump out of a plane at several thousand feet in the air, and then you're going to open up a chute that's going to fill up with air, and it's going to, basically it's going to stop, and you weren't. The last thing you want is the person on the other end to bring up absolutely solid, because most likely any rope is going to shatter under that impact. You need it to sort of gently soften that blow. And so Paracord is designed to stretch, and it is designed to work with those kind of loads, and not fail in that instance. And can it be used for a lot of other stuff? Absolutely. But it wasn't designed for that, and therefore it does have its shortcomings. Paracord works really good for its initial design. Outside of that, it's a little less ideal, but it's a great all-around option. So keep that in mind.
Exactly. And like I said, number one problem is it stretches. Followed by the number 2 problem with this stuff. When it comes to knots, there's 2 ways that Paracord works around knots. Either it's a forever knot, it's never going to come out because some wizardry magicry got in there and bound that knot up solid, or you can't make a knot stick. And it's usually the latter that happens to me. I find that it has a lot of slippage when it comes to knots, especially if there's any moisture introduced. And it doesn't have to be sopping wet like rain, just high humidity. High humidity will make this stuff slip like crazy. So if you're trying to do a press-it knot, and run a ridge line or something like that, and you pull it nice and tight, the press it knot should hold tight and it shouldn't move. Much like the stretching, a few minutes later, it has seemingly worked itself a little looser, and you're constantly adjusting stuff, constantly retightening knots, constantly trying to take the slack out of things. And here's my two big gripes. I mean, they go hand in hand. It stretches and it slips. So what do you want rope to do? Generally, not
Hold
stretch and
still.
not slip.
Yeah. Yeah, so it definitely has its limitations there for sure. And I have seen where a knot locks, you're right, and there's nothing really to grip. You end up tearing the rope apart before it comes loose. Or like you said, it's not holding well enough. And so you put the extra knot in, and all of a sudden it's now might as well be welded. Except now it'll still get longer. And so it's still not holding what you want where you wanted it. So yeah, there's probably your two major disadvantages with it.
And that's what I mean. Like, those are my two big gripes. If nothing else, for no other reason, that would be enough to make me look for other alternatives. Once again, folks, I'm not crapping on Paracord. Well, I'm kind of crapping on Paracord, but I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm just saying there's better options. It has natural
limitations.
Yeah, it has limitations. And just so we're clear, Paracord does come in multiple strengths. I mean, you can get 550, which is 7 strands. I think you can get 300, which is 0 strands inside. It's just an outer cord, basically. You can get 750, which has 11 inner strands. I think you can get 850, which has 8 inner strands. I mean, there's different kinds in any case, but they all kind of come up with the same shortcomings. And when I was getting back to the 550 not holding 550 pounds, the way I tested this, literally threw a piece over the rafters of my sunroom out there, put a stick around it, toggle, whatever you want to call it, and then you just try and do a chin up or pull your weight on it. Every time it snaps. Every single time it snaps. You know what I mean? And I'm not 550 pounds. I'm not a light guy. I'm not even going to joke about that. But I'm not 550 pounds. I'm a little ways off from that at least. Or the odd time it doesn't snap, by the time you actually pull yourself up, it's stretched so much you're already back on the ground. You know what I mean? So I do gripe a lot about this for those reasons. There's another big thing that really bothers me about Paracord, and you touched on it when you were talking about your tree story there. And this is the one that I like to tell a lot of people about, is it doesn't do well when it rubs against itself. No. It's very abrasion proficient, I think is what I want to say here.
What it is it's abrasive. So if you rub Paracord against something, you can use it to cut something. It also heats up really quickly while it does that. And so very few things can cut through Paracord as quick as Paracord can cut through Paracord.
Yeah, exactly. I know that sounds weird, folks, but it actually makes sense. You can use a piece of rope to cut a piece of rope. And basically, you take your rope, you string it out, taunt between two different things, take another length of that rope, and you just use it like a saw over the rope. So if you have a piece of paracord like yonder, and you have another piece of paracord, which I'm sure I have here. This is the reflective stuff, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But if you have this paracord, and it is stretched out, and you take this piece into a saw, and you just kind of weave it over it, it's going to cut through that in a couple seconds. And I mean, it does it very effectively.
We were at Search and Rescue one time, and they asked me to do a quick training course on something. And I said, okay, I love knots. I love tying stuff. And I said, I will do it. And we're sitting there, and we went through all the knots that I could easily think of. And they were talking and something. And someone said, is there anything else you could teach us by rope? And I said, I can show you a neat trick with it. And what I did was I just had them tie a loop and put it over their feet so they could hold it taut. And I gave them another piece and said, cut through that length. And most people were surprised that it only took 2 or 3 pulls that you completely went through the rope. Like, it just snapped. And they're like, huh, I cut through that easily. I'm like, yeah, I mean, you would probably try almost as hard with a sharp knife to cut that same cord. Like, it didn't take much effort. It was shockingly easy to cut.
Amazingly. And Jacob DeFord here in the comments, shout out to him again. He said something that I was going to touch on later. Great time to bring it in. Made my first bow drill fire a few weeks ago and used paracord with my bow. I see Ben smiling already. And it started getting stretchy to the point where it needed to be replaced. I think I still have my demo of this sitting in the closet. You give me 1 sec. You can still hear the chat in here, but yeah, that is the #1 life lesson, there we go, I learned with paracord. paracord.
Yeah.
And I keep this around as a demonstration purpose. I still use this bow drill. This is the first bow I ever achieved a successful bow drill fire with, so it has a little sentimental value to me. But it still has the original paracord on there that I use. Well, no, actually, this isn't the original. I have actually changed this out. So I lie. Anyway, but I'm just looking at it now. I'm like, nah, that's a new piece because mine was so ratty. There's no way this can be it. And I ended up tying the end on here. As most people know, when I do a bow drill, I generally don't tie the bottom on. I leave it loose. That way, if I have to, I can use my hand to adjust the tension on there. If you're listening there, Jacob, that's a secret for you. If you do have to use paracord on your bow drill, down at the bottom end, tie your top end on good and taut. And I know I'm getting off topic here, folks, but seeing Jacob's here, I'm going to give him the pointer anyway. Permanently affix your top end, your bottom end, leave loose. Wrap it around, put your hand on the inside of the bow, put your spindle through. I must have something here I can use as a spindle. This will work. So put your spindle through, loop it in. This may be a little short, but we're going to try and do it. There we go. And when your spindle's in, you can take your hand down to the bottom on the inside, and if it starts getting a little sloppy on you, keep pushing your hand down, and that will tighten it up enough that you can at least get that fire started. It's not a permanent fix, but it is kind of an on-the-fly adjustment you can use to try and compensate for the stretchiness off the paracord. Worse yet, if that paracord gets loose and it starts slipping on your spindle, one, you're probably going to varnish the wood, or two, you're going to end up snapping that string, and then you're completely SOL.
Yeah. So what we're getting at is there are better ropes for some of these things. And I've gotten to lately, there's a couple of types of rope I've really used, but like we talked about tarps and hammocks, and I buy proper guideline. It's worth the extra couple of bucks because it has virtually no stretch. I'm able to quickly put knots in and they stick, and I'm almost always able to untie them. I buy the one with the reflective stuff, similar to some of your paracord, because I love how it lights up at night, and I rarely trip over them because of it. Yeah. So a good.
There we go. No, a little too bright. Anyway, you might be able to see that. It does catch the light quite well. It's just a little. I don't know if it's going to show up on camera. Anyway, yeah.
It shows up great at night. It's shocking how bright the reflective stuff is, both on the paracord and the non-paracord reflective guidelines. But yeah, for guidelines, there is better rope for it, and when you look for that type of rope, guideline is a good thing. If you don't mind disposing it, the what did they call it? Tarred
bank line.
Bank line. I've often used bank line for this. It's again, bank line is often used more in the construction industry. I think it's used for getting taut lines for finding level and setting up fences and flooring and walls and stuff. And so it doesn't stretch. It stays really good. You can a couple of twists and it'll stay in place. Works really good for guidelines. It's not super strong. Like it probably has 25 pounds of strength in it, but believe it or not, 25 pounds will hold the tarp down pretty good.
I was going to say 25 pounds of pressure is a lot in one little spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Once again, you're not going to be holding your own weight with it. That's a lot of weight on a small spot. But if you have a little bit of weight over, spread over that small spot, it actually holds really well. And I do like bank line. Tarred or non-tarred. I generally don't use tarred for doing things like guy lines and stuff like that, just because the thing with tarred bank line, any knot you put in that is permanent. Doesn't matter if it's a slip knot or not. The tire is going to bind. That knot is now permanent.
I agree completely. Tarred bank line is generally a one-use item. If you have long lengths, you can usually cut the ends off and still have a length for a short use again. But generally, like I usually get mine at like dollar stores and in construction. It's usually not super expensive, so you can afford to lose a little bit if you have to. But yeah, I mean, compared to paracord, it works. And honestly, if you're holding your tarp down, you would rather, trust me on this, you would rather your guy line break than your tarp. And something is going to give sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? My tarps have oftentimes cost me I can't believe I'm saying this because years ago I laughed at myself, but I've paid 150 to $300 for a tarp. Most of my tarps are less than that, but I have paid a lot for good tarps. And so I try to take care of the tarps. One of my most expensive ones I think I gave to you.
Yeah, I actually have it fixed. It's sitting over there. The caveat is, I think it's fixed.
Yeah, I tried fixing it a few times. It was a sil nylon tarp. Anyone who's ever used the sil nylon tarp knows it works really good. It's very waterproof. It's very light. It's not super repairable. It has its limitations. It can be done. Um, it's
So for
hard to get
what it's
anything to glue
worth,
to
what
it.
I used to fix that one, and just to jump off topic slightly, if anybody's worked in the wildfire industry and fought forest fires, they make a two-part compound cement for fixing forestry fire hose. That's what I
Okay.
used to fix that with a patch. We're like that stuff bonds. I've used it to fix cars, boots, you name it, and this stuff is like super hard. So it seems good. I just haven't actually taken it out in the woods yet. That's the plan for this summer, is to give it a test and see if we can get that sucker working good. Oh, and I ran it through the sewing machine while it was wet. That way the patch would actually re-sew into the outside of it, and then the sealer would seep into where I put the holes through with the needle. Anyway, getting back online, yeah, there's some other great alternatives there. So if you're looking for the best, in my opinion, and only my opinion, best replacement directly for paracord, it's going to be something like Amsteel. And what's the other name for Amsteel? You use it all the time. I can't remember what you.
Dyneema?
Dyneema. So yeah, Dyneema and Amsteel. So this stuff is a little bit more expensive. This is the downside, folks, or the big pro to paracord is that it is relatively cheap for what you get. You get lots of it. I mean, you can get like 30 meters, 100 feet of this stuff for like $15, maybe less. Once upon a time, I seen like 500 feet going for $15 on Amazon. So you can buy it very cost effectively. Amsteel, not so much. So I do have a picture of Amsteel thrown up here on the old Amazon box here. This is 7/64 Dyneema Amsteel. It's 12 strands. 7/64 I think is basically the same size or the equivalent size to regular paracord. I suppose it actually helps if I pull that web page up now, don't it?
Rated for what? 2,000 pounds?
And that's the thing. It holds a incredible amount of weight. So for the 7/64, it's 1,600 pounds for this specific stuff. This is Samson's Amsteel 7/64. It's 100 feet of it, $60, which is a little on the expensive side. There is better places you can find this. Generally, go to a bulk supply store. You're going to get a little better deals. But just for demonstrations up here on the old Amazon box. Generally, the colors are going to be a little bit more limited in Amsteel. Not that you're not going to have any colors, but you're not going to get the fancy stuff involved. You know what I mean? Generally, there's not going to be a lot of reflectors in it, though you can get some. It's incredibly expensive, but it is good stuff. The thing with this is it's incredibly UV resistant, which paracord, that's kind of the third big gripe I get with it, I guess, is that the UV of that, if you have a piece of paracord left out for like the summer, it's done. It is powder by the end of the summer. Except for the strands inside. The strands inside relatively hold up good in UV. It's the outer casing that lets go, but once the outer casing lets go, the whole thing basically falls apart, turns to crap. Now, Amsteel, on the other hand, super UV resistant, or at least in my experience, it has been. I've used it in many a things now. Never had a problem with it breaking down with UV. Now, somebody can reach out to me if that is not correct. Don't get me wrong. I'm always open to new opinions. But in my experience, it's been great. Significantly better than paracord.
So remember, there's a big difference between paracord and Amsteel. Two of the things is Amsteel has the same strength as steel, the same steel cable, the same thickness. And it was originally designed, if I remember correctly, by DuPont, and was used for fishing gear. So nets and stuff like that. So it's meant to be out in extreme environments for a fairly long time and hold up to massive amounts of weight. So that 7/16, was it a 7/64, which is not very big, is lifting more than 75% of a ton. You know, like, I mean, it almost literally can lift a ton.
Yeah, 1,600 pounds. That's a ton of weight. For the counterpart, European,
2,204 pounds is a ton.
Yeah. So the tensile strength is 725 kilograms or 1,600 pounds. Like Ben said, that's a ton of weight for a small line. You know what I mean? Like, that is a ton of weight.
You're not easily going to break this stuff. Now, the problem with am steel, not good for knotting.
No.
Doesn't do good knots.
Nope, it doesn't do it well. It tends to kind of tear itself apart a little bit. But the good thing about am steel, real easy to make a set of whoopee slings out of it. It has that inner sheath where you can run it back through itself and make those kind of dead end loops.
So if you learn how to properly splice am steel, and it is using through an interweave, and it doesn't take much, a very thin wire folded over and a bit of patience, and you can make some amazing, very adjustable ropes that don't involve knots at all. And so that's how we make the whoopee slings. That's how I've made a whole bunch of other tools with it, and it is possibly one of my favorite ropes. Just because of its weight, its stretch, no torsion, minimal stretch, extremely strong. I think the stuff floats. It's not an issue for me because I rarely need it to. But yeah, it is a great item. And I use it for a ton of stuff. If you need a quick repair, it really can do that stuff for you. I can't recommend it enough. If you're looking for a great bushcrafting rope, I think it has a place in your kit. There's a smaller stuff you can buy. There's two names to go by. Lash It and Sling It are the two different ones. And it's used mostly in still fishing, or the other group that uses it is arborists. They use it for like slinging loads up and down out of trees and stuff. It's thin. It's also hollow core, and you can splice it. And I have spliced it for kids' hammocks and made whoopee slings out of it, and it has held a ton. It can still, and this stuff is micro thin. It still held pretty well my weight. I tested it just to see, and yeah, I wouldn't want to constantly do it because it's so thin. I'm worried you'd cut through material. But one of my favorite products, and I'm glad you brought it up.
So yeah, that's going to be your best bang for buck, I think, in my mind, for the direct replacement of Paracord. Now, there's another product out there which is really good, but it also has some shortcomings too. And depending on how you're going to use it, and this stuff is called, I'm gonna screw this up, but it's UHMWPE.
Dyneema. So, it's still Dyneema.
Yep, still Dyneema, but it's more of a plasticky rope, and this is kind of what I have here. Now, the thing with this stuff is it is a little plasticky. It's gonna melt under heat, so if you're gonna, like, that's the beauty of am steel. It doesn't really melt as well as Paracord or this stuff. It does a little better in heating applications, I've found. Now, this stuff, not so great around heat, but the strength this stuff has, astronomical. Once again, this is 7/64. I bought 2 sets of these. Obviously, I have one attached to my hammock. Here's a set of whoopee slings. And I told Ben about this before. I bought 2 sets of these because these independently are supposed to hold 1,400 kilograms per line. Now, I'm not really sure what the conversion is off the top of my head, but I know it's roughly twice the weight. So this is over a ton on one line. Now, here's the thing. I have done a little testing with this. I bought 2 sets of whoopee slings. One went on my hammock. I knew I was never going to get anywhere near the weight that was going to be, hopefully, between 2 whoopee slings. That's 2,800 kilograms, you know what I mean? If I hit those kind of weights, buddy, move over, neutron star, there's a new king in town. But I did take a second set of these because they're relatively inexpensive. I think I bought the 2 sets of them at the time. It was only $40. They're maybe $20 a piece. I see them now. They're $32 a set. So the price hasn't gone up astronomically, but it has gone up a little bit. Now, the second set I have since destroyed because I put it through a rigorous testing period. First thing I did was throw it up over a rafter, stick a stick in it, and literally pull myself up. Never flinched, you know what I mean? And that's kind of what I expected, honestly. And then I started adding weight. So I hung it from the rafter, and I started getting steel weights and hanging it on this stuff. And I crapped out somewhere around 700 pounds because I was worried that the joist I was connected to was going to start, shifting. So I gave up on that one and said, all right, that's cool. Now, the other thing I did, and people can choose to believe this or not because I've had both sides of it, but there is a video somewhere of me doing this. I connected it to my Ford Ranger, and I pulled another vehicle with it. And I know people are going to say, well, if it's a small car and you're on flat ground, the average person can push that, yada, yada, yada. No, folks, I towed a truck out of a mud hole with this stuff. Now, 2 pieces, I used both of them. I didn't use one. I wasn't that crazy. But I did throw both of them on there. I tied them to my recovery hooks. I tied them to the recovery hooks of a Jeep. And I pulled it out of a little mud hole. Never batted an eye at it. So at that point, I was like, yep, there's no way that's ever going to let me fall on the ground at night. That was the end of my testing. Once again, linear. It's straight weight. It's still not deading a whole bunch of weight, because Buddy in the Jeep, of course, was hammering the gas and trying to get himself out and all that good stuff. But still, to me, that was a great demonstration of how good this stuff is. Will it actually hold up to that acclaimed 1,400 kilograms per strand? I mean, I doubt it. Honestly, everybody over-exaggerates a little bit, but I don't have a way of accurately testing that without terrifying me and getting into forces that are so high I'm worried I'm going to kill myself. You know what I mean?
Actually, I believe it. And I think if you look at the spec for it, and I'd have to look that up. I do have some information I can share you with you. That number is the 80% breaking point, if I remember correctly. So that isn't the actual failure point. That's where it passes a stretching component where it deforms before it fails. So those numbers are actually crazy. But do you want to know what UHMWPE stands for?
I would love to know what that stands for, because I have never known. I've never looked it up.
It is Dyneema, same product.
Okay.
Ultra high molecular weight polyethylene.
There you go. And that is definitely polyethylene, because, like I said, this is kind of reminds me, when I first got them, I'm like, this is dollar store rope. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is just straight up plastic dollar store rope. But no, sir. This stuff is well beyond dollar store rope capabilities.
When I first got it, when I started playing with whoopee slings, and I put the hammock up, and I showed like my wife and a few other people how it works, and I said, oh, you just pull it through here, and it's like, ooh, slide it any length I want, and then you sit in it, and you're gonna not fall to the ground. Nobody believed me. They're like, you are crazy. That thin rope is not holding my ass, and it's gonna slip. Like, it's gonna fail. And I'm like, you have to trust me that this is not going to fall. And of course, I'm using the proper knots and all that to hang it off of straps for the tree huggers. And they're like, that little arrow shaft is going to hold me up. And I'm like, no, it's the knot. It's not going to fail. And so the Marlin Spike hitch is what I think I used. And no, man, I've never had one fail. I've never had one slip. I did have the constrictor string slip, but that's, I think, a poor design on my part. I should have done something different. But the whoopee slings I've always had very good success for, and they are by far my favorite method of hanging a hammock. And even tightening tarps, I've used it for that too, and it's just a lighter version of it, and it works really good. Problem with it, and I can't say this enough, if you're worried about the material you're holding together more than the rope, don't use it, because it is stronger than whatever you're hooking it to. So
100%.
If you want to protect your tarp, go with the bank line. The bank line will fail before the tarp, and you will save your tarp. You want to make sure it doesn't move? Go with the Dyneema.
It ain't moving.
and whatever hurricane or whatever hits that tarp, it will last until the tarp falls apart. But your rope will still be there where you left it the night before, or the tree you attached will be ripped in. Something will go. But it won't be your whoopee sling.
It won't be the whoopee sling. Absolutely not. The other good thing I like about this stuff, it's really good with water. You know what I mean? Like, it's polyethylene. You know what I mean? Even the Amsteel, it's really good around water too. It floats. It doesn't. Sorry?
What? Amsteel, UHM, WPE, and Dyneema are all the same thing.
Okay, I guess more the fiber. When I say Amsteel, I'm talking about the fiber stuff versus the U whatever the hell stuff, which is the polyethylene stuff. So the fiber stuff that I showed up there originally, it works really well in water. Generally, it floats. It's lighter than water. It's going to stick around. It's not going to sink on you. Sheds the water fairly easily. And I don't find it adds anything to the rope. Maybe makes it a little more slick. I'm not going to lie. Water does that. It's a lubricating property. But I don't find it affects it terribly like it did with Paracord.
Yeah. If you get Paracord wet and pull it tight, when it dries, that's never coming apart.
Yeah, absolutely. This stuff still seemed to be fine even after it dried and it was wet. It seems to, bounce back pretty well. Now, we did talk about some thinner stuff there too, like people liked the inside lines or they want something a little thinner, and you can get something that's called Kevlar rope. And I used to have a little spool of it here. I've shown it multiple times on podcasts, and of course, the one night that I want to find it, can't find it. It's around. I know it is. It's probably hiding behind my monitor or something stupid, and I just can't find it. But in any case, I do have a picture of it. And this is the exact stuff I bought because you can clearly see that I previously ordered it back in 2019. Now, the price has gone up significantly. It is now $36. There's 50 feet of this, and it holds 1,000 pounds. The thing is, this stuff here, it's about the size of yarn. And I was really hesitant to believe that it would hold 1,000 pounds. So once again, over the truss it went in my sunroom, and I could easily hold my own weight. And it didn't stretch. It didn't give that, holy crap, this is sketchy as hell feeling. It was solid. I bounced on it, had no problems. This is generally what I use or keep in my bag, which I guess I should have looked to see if it was in my bag. I use this a lot for traps, if I'm going to be making traps, doing demos on that, or I use this for bank line. Not bank line, guy lines. I love this stuff for guy lines. However, with the cost of it going up as much as it did, chances are I'm going to be like Ben and I'm going to bounce over to bank line just because cost versus what you get is just right on par with what I want. But this stuff, if you can afford it, it is amazing for making guy lines and stuff like that. It holds incredibly strong. And basically, it's just another type of Amsteel. It's not... Amsteel's a brand name more than... I think it's a brand name, isn't it, Ben? Or Dymo?
Yeah, Amsteel is it's a particular weave, but it's also I think it's DuPont, maybe. It's their brand. More generally, and other companies produce it, Samsonite, maybe. Samsonite is Amsteel.
Okay.
If you buy it as just Dyneema, it's the same material. It just can't go by that brand name. And then UHME is also another more scientific name for it or whatever. And so all those are the same material, just different manufacturers or whatever. So if you buy it and it's the hollow weave, it's the hollow weave. You can buy it in different types of weave, and you get different properties as a result of that. But the strength per fiber is still pretty well consistently. And I think it's actually stronger per weight than Kevlar.
It could be. I don't know. I know this Kevlar stuff here that, once again, the acclaimed is 1,000 pounds on 2.6 millimeters. So, like I said, it's roughly about the size of yarn, but it works exactly like the fiber Amsteel. It has the hollow core. If you can get a piece of wire through it, you can make whoopee slings out of it. Technically, it would be strong enough to hold up your weight, but it's so thin at that point, it's probably going to start cutting through material and stuff. What I like about Kevlar, and I don't know if this holds up with the other ones there or not, Ben would know more. Kevlar is used in firefighting. We use it in our stitching and stuff like that. It's incredibly highly resistant to heat. So if you're going to be using something in and around heat, and this is where I use this stuff, or I'm looking for a little thicker stuff to use this for, bow drill. Any of that friction that you're going to be getting around the spindle and stuff like that, it's not going to generate any heat. It's not going to, well, it'll generate heat. It's not going to damage the line and smooth it off like it would with paracord. So this is what I'm hopefully going to do, is get a little bigger piece of this and try it out. Now, the other thing somebody told me about this was up to about 1.5 inches. You can actually use this Kevlar line, the specific stuff that I just threw up there. You can cut up to sticks 1.5 inches in diameter with it, just using it like a saw. And it will literally burn through it, more or less. You know what I mean? But it won't damage the line to the point where it fails. So I haven't actually tried that yet. If I can actually ever find my line again, it might be something that I give an interest in trying. It was on my list of stuff to attempt trying anyway. But in any case, it's basically 90 pounds per thread. It's very abrasive, more than paracord is. Kevlar is very abrasive, more than paracord is. Okay, so once again that's Nomad chiming in for the comments there. He says it's more abrasive than paracord. I'm going to be honest with you, Nomad. All I'm doing is with my personal testing and what the info sheet says on it. All it says is resist severe abrasions even in the thinnest diameter to make the best trip line, flexible, fast, blah, 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 blah. So that's all I'm going off.
This stuff is used, like Kevlar line is often used for kites and other things too, right?
Exactly. I mean, a lot of times if you buy kite string or look for Kevlar kite string, you're going to find that stuff.
Here's a write-up on UHMWPE is a fiber is higher in strength and lower in weight compared to Kevlar. This allows the high level of bracing resistance to be achieved with much less fiber, including a trade-off between comfort, style, and performance. This is in reference to motorcycle gear for crash gear. So Dyneema style gear is actually a little better, argumentatively, in certain ways than Kevlar because it allows you to have thinner, lighter material and give you the same protection. Maybe not the same cushion, uh, but if you had a pair of jeans made of Dyneema, it's probably not going to rip through the jeans very quickly. And if you're sliding along the pavement, it's abrasion resistant. It's not going to rip before you fall. You stop.
And that's fair.
I would personally try not to have that happen to me either way. So, yeah, that's where we're getting with that. Obviously, we have an unhealthy love for Dyneema, but we enjoy it. Paracord failed us in that respect. But I think, because we have 10 minutes left, more or less.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's not leave a sour taste in everybody's mouth. Let's talk about some of the good things about Paracord. Yeah. Now that we crapped on it for the entire show, let's talk about some of the good things, because Paracord does have some good features that make it a viable option to carry some in your pack. Absolutely.
So Paracord is relatively cheap. Relatively cheap compared to some of the other alternatives. The other thing is it's very much used in types of jewelry and crafts. So people make keychains out of it, survival bracelets. And one of the big things is when you open up that bracelet you probably have 12, 15 feet of rope there.
Yep.
But not only that, you have 12, 15 feet of rope, and in that rope you can pull it out and get the jacket, the 7 strands, and if you have like the fire stuff, maybe a couple of additional strands that are usable for many things. One of the ones I used to have had the fiber, but it also had like a little wire strand that you could use to do like.
I think I might have some of that stuff. Just keep chatting there, Ben. I'm not going far.
You could make traps for them, or you could potentially make other survival things. You could use it for sewing. The individual white strands are really good for fishing. So, pound for pound, it does offer an awful lot.
So this isn't the stuff with wire in it. It must be outside, but this is another one I have. And it comes with several strands inside. So just by looking at it and pulling it apart here in my hands, 2, 4, 6, 7, there's 7 of those white strands. Like any other paracord, then they have the fire starting wick, and then they have a piece of fishing line inside it as well. So, I call it gimmicks, but I'm not saying it's gimmicks in a bad way. I mean, like the added feature. It's gimmicks, in all honesty. But they're cool gimmicks. They add functionality. It definitely has a place. I mean, if you were in a survival situation, you're going to get a lot of multi-use out of a piece of paracord. You know what I mean? Much like you said, you got the outer sheath, all the little stuff inside. If you get this gimmicky stuff with the other little stuff on it, you get a lot of functionality for not a whole lot of price.
And like I've watched a lot of people, especially if you take the cores out and just use the outer sheathing.
Hold on, Ben. You might have muted yourself, or I muted you. Can anybody hear Ben out there? Or is it just me that's not being able to hear him? Say something else there, Ben.
Okay. Can you hear me? I didn't think I changed anything. Oh.
There we go. We're back. It was me. I somehow muted myself. I muted everything. So anyway.
So what I was saying is, if some people take just the outer jacket and you're able to like wrap it around things, and the first place I thought of really is below the head of your axe, usually 6 to 8 inches is perfect for, if you're splitting wood and stuff, it takes the absorption before your handle and saves your axe. People wrap their knife handles with it to make a more comfortable grip, but also you have that spare bit of rope that's hidden in your kit. So that's obviously really good. In a survival situation, the fact that one rope really becomes 8 to 10 ropes, depending on the situation you're in, is an advantage. And honestly, the thinner strands would make a decent, quick way to tie down a tarp or secure some pieces together or make a quick trap. So if you had to choose only one rope, I can see why some people would choose the paracord.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, I'm not crapping on paracord to the point where I'm saying don't buy it, it's no good. It's be aware of both sides of the coin is all this whole thing was about. The other good thing... Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, if you're doing stuff with paracord and it's not working out the way you think it is, and you're like thinking you're doing it wrong, no, paracord has its disadvantages, and be aware of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other nice things about Paracord, where it is used in a lot of projects and stuff like that, there is a ton of color options out there for Paracord. Like the spectrum of the rainbow, you can get it with the reflective stuff in it. This is supposed to be the reflective stuff as well in these red ones. It did not work as well as I liked it to. Like, it does reflect a little bit, absolutely, but you can get stuff that actually has like the shiny reflecting stuff in it, which once again you can't really see it in the camera here. But in person, that is shining quite nice. And in a dark place, like out in the woods, I used to use this stuff a lot for guy lines. And walking around at night, even with my headlamp on low, it lit up like a Christmas tree. Like I was never tripping over this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I absolutely like it for stuff like that. The reflective stuff, like I said, is a lifesaver in the woods.
Absolutely. And that's the bottom line here, folks. Once again, just to reiterate, Paracord has its place. Paracord has its limitations. Just be aware of both sides and what you are doing with it. If you're, like Ben said, if you're doing something with Paracord and it doesn't seem to be doing what you want it to, we offered some other solutions or other options out there for you, and they're not the be all to end all. Those are just ones that have worked well for us. I still carry Paracord in my bag. Don't get me wrong. I never go into the woods without a piece of Paracord. I just don't solely take Paracord. I back it up with some other stuff. And I even take some of this stuff, which is literally just the dollar store junk rope. This stuff has a point too. If I'm going to tie something, I'm just sacrificing that piece of rope. Guess what comes out first? This stuff. For the girls, when I take them camping, not just Melissa and Lily, but my oldest two, Christiane, I've taken them out to the waterfall before, and I made a chain shelter. That way they could get changed in the woods to go swimming. All it required was some tarp and rope. This is the rope I use. I'm not breaking out my good, quote unquote, good rope, expensive rope to make a chain shelter. All I needed was literally a $2 stick of rope and a $4 tarp from the dollar store. Made a great change station. And then just over from that, we made another little cube for a bathroom. And you set your portable toilet or your bucket or dig your hole or whatever you're going to do in there. And everybody's happy and cozy. Paracord is great. It's not the be all to end all. There's going to be other options. Don't limit yourself. Don't put the blinders on. Don't make the mistake I made. Sink a ton of money into this stuff thinking it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's going to do everything. Nothing else is ever going to replace it. And then end up with so much of the crap that you don't know what to do with it. I've given it away. I have done everything and I still have a ton of it. And it has a place. I just didn't need that much. I should have taken some of that money, bought a little better stuff like the Dyneema and things for when I want to make ridge lines and more permanent stuff, and bought some Paracord for the in-between and bought some cheaper stuff for the, like everything. There's a use for everything. I guess at the end of the day, Paracord does everything relatively okay, but nothing super great. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll get you out in a pinch. It has its place, but rope that's designed for the situation you're doing is obviously better. And I don't think there's an argument there. Think about what you want the rope to do and buy a rope that's meant to do that. So if you want something that doesn't stretch, don't buy Paracord. But if you need something that's going to absorb an impact, Paracord's pretty good. But honestly, say you're pulling something in the back of a truck and there's going to be loads. A bungee cord is even better because it's going to reset back to its spot really quickly. So there's something that's going to absorb an impact but then reset. So there's a right product for each task. If you're going to jump out of a plane, I would suggest using Paracord on your parachute. If you're going to lash a tarp down, use something that's not going to stretch and that's adjustable and easy to fix the knots in. So good products out there. I love a good press-it knot on a good rope, and you can adjust things on the fly. That's always my preferred method for securing a tarp.
Yeah. No, I love a press-it knot. And if anybody doesn't know what a press-it knot is, we have done episodes where we've talked about knots. I suggest going back and checking them out. Not to toot our own horn, but I do got to plug us a little bit. There's also all kinds of other good guides out there that'll show you knots. If you really want to see good examples, and I'm not saying ours are bad, but if you want to see good examples of multiple different knots, just Google or whatever search engine you happen, animated knot guide. And there's a website there, and it literally has like little animated gifs that show you how to tie a plethora of knots and what they do and what they're good for. And that's where I learned a lot of my really obscure knots. The fire service is where I learned all my basic knots, but like the real obscure stuff I know pretty much came from that website.
Yeah. There's some really good YouTube tutorials on how to tie or splice am steel Dyneema type rope, and I learned how to make soft shackles that way. And if anyone doesn't know what a soft shackle is, think of a rope that can do what not paracord, what your carabiner can do.
Yeah, this is all wrapped up in there too hard. I'm not gonna try and dig that out.
But I like them because they're not as abrasive, as they're not as hard. So if you want to tie something down and quickly lash it and not worry about it bouncing around, soft shackles are the way to go. They're used on sailboats and stuff. You'll see a lot of sailors using the stuff. Again, used in the marine world. But you'll also find am steel Dyneema. Like, I'm not going to read it the whole thing again, but it's used in winches on a lot of modern. If you have a synthetic rope on your winch, chances are it's a Dyneema.
That's what I use on my ATV. It's got me out of everything I needed so far. Only thing is, keep it clean.
Yeah. So.
But anyway, folks,
Yeah.
that's pretty much all I had to say tonight. What about you, Ben? You got any final thoughts for us?
No, I think we covered it pretty good. I'm happy with the overall episode. If you know you're using rope or you have something that's really intriguing you, or you've geeked out on it more than me and Robert, we would love to hear what you've done. Trust me, if you're a bigger geek than me and Robert on ropes and anything else, we want to know about it.
Absolutely. We obsessively, compulsively research things and play with stuff. And funny enough, right after the podcast, we're going to chat about something else that Ben's been researching. So this is an ongoing experience for us, and we always love more input into it.
Yeah. Yeah. We are going to make fun of my research in a few minutes. So enjoy, everyone.
All right, folks. For us here, as we always say, get out there, have fun, get dirty, just be safe. Come back and give us some stories. We'd love to hear from it. Any way you want to get a hold of us is down there. I'm not going to, beat that dead horse anymore.